Hello and welcome to Gareth, Icke tonight. In the slightly edited words of legendary rock band Pink Floyd, all in all, it's just another lick of the wall. The conservative influencers and self-prescribed patriots of the world have all descended upon the state of Israel in the last 2 weeks because nothing says Britain first or American first quite like asking how high when a foreign government tells you to jump. The mission of the mass war liquor summoning is clearly a desperate attempt to turn the tide as Israel's image lay in tatters. Over 2 years of bombing refugee camps, hospitals, schools, pumping over 300 bullets into a 5-year-old child as she begged for help, and then killing the paramedics that attempted to save her, will have that effect on one's image. And that was even before they started starving those they hadn't already blown to pieces. The state of Israel has always relied on the Christian right in order to maintain the status quo. The status quo being America sends them billions and Israel does what they want with it. That changed over the last year in particular. American Christians historically look the other way, instead choosing to repeat the tired Israel has a right to defend itself mantra when faced with the reality of war crimes and state-sponsored cruelty. But something changed. The far-right Netanyahu government went too far, committed too many atrocities, and despite them banning foreign journalists and killing Palestinian ones, images got out and the moral compass of those across the West from both sides of the political divide started to kick in. I support Israel, but enough's enough. I'm a Christian. I've always stood with Israel, but that provided the Rothschild-founded Zionist entity with a problem. Because without US support, they can't do what they do. They can't bring down the nations that surround them. Without America's open checkbook and the West's willingness to wage wars on their behalf in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and elsewhere, the expansionist dreams of the Greater Israel Project will find itself in the same sorry state as its public image. They could probably win back at least a few by stopping what they're doing, but they have no intention of that. The colonization land grab waits for no mere mortal man. It must continue. Gaza must be swallowed up, the West Bank annexed, and Lebanon and southern Syria must be gobbled up as well because, the book says so, right? So what can be done to shift the right back into supporting them without actually stopping doing the things that have led the right to move away from supporting them? Well, that's easy. You buy up social media companies and then you round up all the most corruptible, mouth-for-hire faux patriots you can lay your hands on and you summon them to the wall. You get them to churn out Hasbro propaganda video after Hasbro propaganda video to beam back to their followers in Europe and the USA. In a combination of inverting history, presenting heavily edited biblical texts as fact, and then downright lying, the influencers have attempted to completely demonize the Palestinian people in the eyes of the public. Because maybe if we think less of these people, we'll go back to looking the other way, right? Wrong. Of course, some will lap it up, but the majority aren't. Now, this is encouraging because, let's be honest, the propaganda has been intense. It's been embarrassing. It's been really freaking embarrassing, but it has been intense. Now, I'll be honest, I've been laughing at most of it because it's so bad. Watching out of their depth patriots being forced to perform daily humiliation rituals is quite a sight to behold. And watching people that claim to fight against tyranny, some whose stock in that regard rose enormously during the COVID period, now on their knees with their tongues firmly in the backside of a prime minister that described his people as lab rats for Pfizer, is also quite something. But I saw one particular video this week which actually turned my amusement to anger. Now, I've made the point a few times now that these people, these influencers, have a very understandable and well-shared issue with mass immigration into Europe and how that's affected our society. However, they have a really serious issue with the Palestinians, a group of people that don't want to come here. The one people that want to stay in their homeland, they don't want to come into Europe and take your job, yet they're the most despised by the group whose whole shtick is opposing mass immigration. And then on the other hand, these same people adore and lick the wall of a nation that through Middle East wars on its behalf have caused at least a significant portion of that mass immigration from the Middle East into Europe, the UK, and beyond. And in fact, even as the new media are in Israel, the government they're there at the behest of are plotting openly to remove the people from Gaza, from their land, and resettle them into Europe. Insane settlers are attacking Palestinians in the West Bank, forcing them off their land so they can steal it for themselves, of course, all supported by the US taxpayer and the Israeli military. Now, where do these wall lickers think these people will eventually end up once their homeland is stolen? So with this in mind, Tommy Robinson painting one of these settlers as a victim was kind of mind-blowing. It went from some lad from Luton who appears to be over a barrel, being exploited in a game he doesn't fully understand, to being a fella that knows exactly what he's doing and he's happy doing it. Now, he speaks to a settler who's from America, obviously, who's decided to settle in someone else's land 5,000 miles away from his own. Land that's forcefully been taken away from the native population and handed to immigrants from the US and Europe. And then, when the oppressed natives have the gall to resist this colonization, they paint themselves as the victims in this scenario. And obviously, Tommy just nods along, as you would expect. But by this logic, immigrants should be able to come to the UK, right? They should be able to come over here, they should be able to take over our land, and we, the natives, should be forced off to God knows where and have absolutely no right to resist. It's only fair, isn't it? Fighting-age lads crossing the English Channel should simply claim that Great Britain is their ancestral land, despite having never been here before, having no family ties to the land, looking nothing like the native population and speaking with a foreign tongue. Because what's the difference between the two here? The Bible? God help us. Now, while I'm in the middle of this kind of question-asking mode, because I'm sure I'll get the usual nonsense for making these points, let me ask this question. Why am I free to call out the actions of the governments of Keir Starmer, Donald Trump, of Vladimir Zelensky, of Vladimir Putin, Mohammed bin Salman, Xi Jinping, whoever, without being accused of anything whatsoever? I can call out whatever government I want. Whatever government, apart from the government of a wanted international war criminal who's on the hook for mass corruption. That is funny, isn't it?